Time to go back to Great Battles of History, Alexander. And we got Gaugamela, which of course is the Smurfs' great enemy. And since the Persians are blue, we know they're going to lose here. This is a big one. Persian army doesn't have those stupid double-sized units. A little bit more cavalry here. This cav and chariots, and remember their chariots aren't absolute shit in this one, although these aren't the elite chariots that they had in the last battle. The imperial bodyguard chariots. We have cav basically running pretty much the entire front line, and if you count the chariots in all of this too, there's some elephants up here that, although they're right at the front of the battle line, supposedly weren't really actually involved in the battle. And they're not particularly good elephants. They're low quality ones. The Indians have better ones once we get deeper into Alexander's conquests. So there's a little bit of Darius's bodyguard sitting here. And then in the back, he's got his infantry, which is nothing but lights and skirmishers. Not really what you want in this situation. But all that cavalry should be of some value in dealing with these phalanxes. And I'm going to have to be a little careful in terms of how I want to face it. Now, the original game used just a regular map, large map, but whatever. I mean, not one of the cut down, but a full map sheet for this battle. But by the deluxe edition, they decided, this is a little tight. They probably had things shifted over a little bit and added this additional map sheet. Now, what's kind of weird here is you've got a little bit of room to maneuver over here, but quite a bit over here. And here's actually where the terrain was a little tricky and you would have any kind of problem at all. We have some special rule. There are also some chariot lanes. I don't know what the hell that was up. But we have a forward baggage train, which some of the sources mention the Macedonian camp was essentially pillaged. That would have been too far in the designer's estimation behind the lines to actually attack. So they think this is some kind of forward supply train. If the Persians manage to run into this thing, it inflicts 10 route points on the Macedonians. And army size-wise, wow, the Macedonians look like they're in a lot of trouble. But once you start looking at quality, well, there's some decent stuff here. There's a lot of cataphracted Persians, which are going to be kind of tough. But, of course, these things are solid as hell. This is fairly good quality, equivalent to the cataphracted, but not with all the bonuses. And then, of course, the companions, which are pretty kick-ass. So the question comes down to, do you meet strength with strength, or do you try to bust up their slightly weaker stuff over here? Just a lot of interesting choices here. I've got the heavy infantry center, which obviously I don't want to advance too quickly, because if that gets outflanked, the Macedonians are in a lot of trouble. But they are heavily outnumbered here, and although not as heavily as some of the ancient sources would claim, supposedly somewhat ridiculously, like 1 million men, but supposedly the Macedonians should have the edge in this one, especially since, again, I am using all of the contingency commanders, which is why there's so many officers here. There's only 3 actual commanders on the Macedonian side, and the game suggests if you want to play it all competitively, play with only 2 or 3 of these. I'm actually not so sure they add that much to the Macedonian capabilities to throw so many in. But they do give you a little bit extra ability to move units. They give you the capability to get some combat bonuses on units you wouldn't normally get them on. And I don't know. but they don't really make up for, they don't interleave with the Persian commanders, who are all kind of going to have to go first, except for the elite activation that Alexander gets to make. I'm not terribly familiar with Alexander's battles, so I'm kind of getting the information out of here on it. And in the free setup scenario, they talk a little bit about the historical aspect. Once the Persian attack had been stopped, on the Macedonian side, Alexander intended to conduct a tactical defense with his refused left and right flanks in an oblique advance. Well, there's a few problems. One is edge of map. Edge of map means it's harder to rally your units and take advantage of your full command advantage. So I do want to advance, there's no question of that. Another factor is I kind of want to, by the way, the Persians chose the battlefield again. It seems like Darius tended to get the strategic advantage, at least in the big battles against Alexander, but it didn't pan out with the combination of tactical systems, quality of troops, and quality of leadership. But another problem is being on the defensive isn't necessarily a very good thing in this system if you have the better leadership. If you have the better leadership, you kind of want to be controlling the pace of the battle. The problem is I'm not quite sure how far I can advance. What I'd really like to do is kind of like that oblique advanced idea. Hey, there's more room on the map to this side. Just try to shift the entire army over, because the Persians aren't going to have a chance to respond to that, and then kind of wheel my phalanxes in order to try to hit at an oblique. That seems like a good idea, because I'm just so outnumbered here. I can't really see allowing the Persians to advance on me, because they will be able to outflank me and they will be able to put the weight where they want it. And I also can't really see just charging forward, because I will get enveloped in that case. Already the Persians are suffering from some problems. They threw some chariots up forward. They have these really crappy leaders who can send a couple of units forward at a time. They have to rebuild their line, as they advance. And it's going to take a while. And that piecemeal situation may be something the Macedonians can take advantage of. Well, I managed to get one momentum, move an extra one of these chariots forward, and then I had a die roll of doom, crisis of faith. All kinds of units fall back, and now my organization is all screwed up. Now, I have lines in this game. The Persians tend to. Luckily for me, it's only cav lines. Okay. I was going to say, I may have just lost one of my line commands because of this. And the Persian activations are done. And you can see they're kind of a ragged, disorganized advance with units kind of off in the middle of nowhere, just hoping the rest of their units could catch up to them this turn. Line of chariots here, some elephants in the background to try to handle the cav over there. A few more chariots, pile of light cav here, and all the leaders left behind in case they got activations and keep pulling the reinforcements forward. Those disordered, essentially chariot and light cav line being there. Well, that's too good an opportunity to pass up, so the Macedonian line pushes forward. Alexander didn't get his momentum. He just got his base move and his elite move early on. That's why I take the elite move, to make sure that I get at least 2 activities. And things are a little disordered here as well, but what I'm looking at is, hey, with a trump in or whatever, chances are the Persians aren't going to have a very solid line in place, and I can launch forward, hit the flanks maybe, although maybe not so much with the heavy cav. That's going to just pound right into the lights. Likewise over here, These lancers might want to get into charge formation so that they're more effective. That's not important if I'm hitting the chariots, though. If I'm hitting the side of the chariots, I'd like to, see if I can at least force them to make the tactical quality check for turning or whatever, so that they might just rout away. And, my hope is that they're just crappy enough units that enough of them will leave one way or another, that I have time then to reform before the Persian army comes forward. It can't come forward in any kind of solid force. It just cannot. Only the cav can operate with any kind of cohesion at all. And one of the problems is I have to get the front line units out of the way before I can start moving back the second rank, and then the third rank is never going to get in the battle because that's all like light infantry back there. Peculiarities of the chariot, which is like this weird it doesn't have a strict superiority the way most pairs of tactical weapon systems have. It basically is pretty strong against anything that comes up against its front. And the only way of beating it, I have tons of different types of things that could attack it, but the only real way of beating it is, legionnaires are capable of it. Elephants are capable of it, but otherwise the only way of beating it is to outflank the damn things. They're just incredibly powerful. I don't remember them being that powerful in SPQR, but I did look at the charts, and I think I confirmed they still had the same values. It's just they have real tactical qualities here, not the level that they have in Chariots of Fire, but real ones. And there's nothing I can throw up against the front of them. The thing I can hope for is, the problem is that I can't hit their flanks at the distance that I'm at. And I kind of don't want to waste Alexander's move at this point. I would rather wait and see what the rest of the Persians do. There's a good possibility the chariots just won't be able to do anything. The other thing is, if they attack something in the front, they have a fairly good chance of just being ignored as the infantry or whatever kind of lets them pass through and takes a cohesion hit. So, there is that as well. They're not capable of inflicting the kind of damage that their numbers would represent here. Anyway, what I definitely don't want to do is like strand units near them and give them any opportunity to hit that. So I've got to let pretty much the Persians move, and that's largely because where Alexander is. If he was over here, I could affect those light cav over there and do a preemptive attack there. On the bright side, the Persian leaders aren't up with their chariots. They hung back to command to bring more units forward. And as the Persians try to bring their line into some kind of accordant, some kind of conformance with itself, one of the lousy leaders, the first one we play, gets a die roll of doom. That launches the heavy cav attack, and you see it just smashed aside some of that light cav, a couple of it over there already. You see the effects of the lousy Persian leadership. Line commands not being terribly effective here anyway. Unless they're within range of Darius, they're not going to be able to do a line command. Right? No, we got a couple of wing leaders other than Darius. We got one over here. No, he's got line command. Who's the other wing? Who's the other wing nut? I might have screwed up here because Mazius is a wing commander, so he actually could have done, I think, a single line command. I'll have to look up the rules. But anyway, what we've got is like this total piecemeal type of attempt to engage, where little bits of the army are, moving forward to catch up with the other little bits. And clearly that's going to be a mess. Clearly that's a sign of terrible leadership. I don't know how accurate it is. in terms of, was the Persian army truly that disorganized? It's showing the feel of, I mean, even the barbarian armies tended to be able to surge forward all at once. I guess the way that you kind of show the may be able to is the momentum rolls. How many of their forces can they get up there, or can they get their line command or whatever? As far as I can see, this guy could only issue a line command by making the die roll, or by being within Darius's command. It's only in his initial orders that he gets the freebie. And I gave the freebies to everybody, so I may have actually advantaged the Persians a little bit. It's allowed these big units to push forward. All right, now we're on the Macedonian reaction, and there's still this big gap, which is problematic. I have to figure out how to cross that space, how to get the flank attacks with the right kind of units. Obviously I don't want to break up my phalanx formation trying to chase down chariots. The proper unit to use for this is, of course, the skirmisher. Then clean up at the end of the turn. Over here, we were able to make some headway on this flank. There's no question there. Kind of broken aside the extreme of the flank. See, these are all routed. Those are going to be running back. And that exposed some chariots, so skirmishers could come up. Well, the chariots were able to turn in reaction. I hope they can do that shit. I'll have to look that up. And the light cav is there, but it's, that's not really sufficient to stop the heavies, although the heavies are fatigued and damaged. You can see we got a routed unit here. Over on this side, similarly, we were able to bust aside the light cav and actually slam into some of the heavy cav. The Scythians have taken a lot of damage. They're probably pretty much useless as a command. And not that there's any real distinguishment by country here, but I mean, they were a big unit that has been pretty much wiped out, or at least knocked out for now. And then again, the skirmishers came into place. This time I had the advantage. I had heavy cav that had gotten behind the enemy line. This stuff is really fatigued, but they turned around and smacked the rear of or the flank of a chariot that couldn't react anymore and drove it in front. That's going to cause some chaos. Probably not too much. If I can get a leader up there, the chariots can do some pretty cool stuff. I think the most impressive thing about them is just a line of them riding by and killing one unit. But you kind of need leaders devoted to dealing with the chariots to make them work. A line of chariots up here without a commander is not anywhere near as powerful as the kinds of things we saw over in Chariots of Fire. But the problem is, I can't win this battle with one line of chariots. So I have to bring the other forces up. But the chariots do serve as one hell of an impediment because they're such a threat that I have to get them out of the way. I guess. I don't know. And they're hard to deal with because you kind of really have to outflank them. Unlike the cav, which you just have to knock it so that it's no longer, even if it's heavy cav, if you can hit it once and knock out its charge superiority or its charge formation, then you can hit it with like lancers that are in charge formation and now they're superior and they break it. So you can bounce one unit off of it and then hit it with another or whatever. And with Alexander's command ability, hey, look, I rallied a unit. I've got routed units too, though. All right, it's cleanup time. And I'll probably try to go back to sleep. So I'll stop back in for a moment just to show the final picture because it does show something, a really hard call that the sides have to make in this game. And I've pointed this out in other GBOH battles. But especially when your leadership's not very good. And both sides have their problems with leadership. for the Persians, they have a lot of crappy leaders. And trying to rally those units is as likely to fail as anything else. But also, it means that you're, spending some of your few capable activities to try to prevent yourself from losing more points. The points are racking up, there's no question there. Where you could be throwing more units into the front in this kind of, to prevent the piecemeal from being too bad. If I can get more units up there, hey, maybe something good can happen out of it. All right. It's just really hard when you have lousy leaders and lousy troops. But it's not trivial for the Macedonians either. For example, here, well, I'm in range that I can make a rally attempt with each of those, and I definitely want to make an attempt to prevent them from leaving the map. With the Persian, it's a harder call because it really does, the opportunity cost is much higher. There's more units trying to withdraw, and I really kind of need all the leadership I have because it's so lousy. It's so unlikely to get a momentum. A bunch of bad leaders can move an equivalent number of forces up, not counting momentum. But you need the momentum to move this big an army. The elite initiative action was largely taken for recovery, but we had a couple of strikes. The Lancers here routed some heavy cav, and I tried to sneak some skirmishers around the back, and they're still skirmishers. They may be attackers superior, they may be attacking on the 5 table to begin with, but they're skirmishers. They're only going to be size 1 usually. The Acreans, yeah, they're usually going to be size 1, so they're just not going to have a lot of oomph to them. And trying to jump on those chariots, well, both units would have routed, but the skirmishers routed more. These were my bow skirmishers. They're particularly low morale and had been running pretty hard. It's beginning to get real. Light cav and haven't handled that yet, and chariots managed to kill a couple of the Thessalian heavy cav. And it's a pretty big deal, actually kill. Well, one was a routed unit. Why is the other one dead? I'm not sure why the other one's dead. The other one should be routed. I think I took one off that should be routed here. But still. And yeah, I probably thought it was that skirmisher that I'm trying to deal with. That should be pretty quick. Persians have finished up their activations, and a little bit of counterattack over here, a little bit of movement strengthening the center a little. Unfortunately over here, on his second momentum roll, he ended up getting a die roll of doom effect, and that hands an action over to the Macedonians. And the question is, where the hell to take it? Because I don't really want to move the center forward, not until I clear up at least one of the flanks and can kind of operate on it. But then I look at the other options. Alexander is more likely to get activations and doesn't have a lot of units, so I think I'll take it over here. But it's not like he has a lot of stuff that he can play with. The one advantage the Macedonians can do, though, is they can double action with their units and such not. They have a little bit higher tactical quality, and they have the command rating so that they can recover units as they go. So maybe that's the key to being more active is the key to maybe winning one or both of these flanks. Because as it stands right now, it looks kind of ugly for the Macedonians, to tell you the truth. It's just that normally when I get those extra activations, I have leaders in places I really want to move things. But here I'm kind of like, well, he's got enough on his plate. already, and so does Alexander. They don't have a lot of units there. They just have, potential positional advantages where they can attack. So, for example, well, this heavy cav isn't really advantaged in any way. But if we can get around the flank and start cracking that would be valuable. So, I mean, I guess getting additional activations is a good thing, but it's really hard to make the decision of, not to make the decision of where, but of just kind of, gee, I don't know if I need any additionals. I'm sure this is going to work out too well, but over here, who is this? Craterus. Shifted some of the companion heavy cav with the hope of kind of, again, getting behind or to the flank on those chariots. But at this point, there's some infantry in there, and these guys are kind of getting in the way of the big line. I was thinking, I kind of want to shift that this way to help cover. This side looks like it's working pretty well, and I don't know. Bad choices as far as I'm concerned. Over here, Alexander's having some trouble. And I started sending some peltists his way, as well as, some rallies. I'm going to do the post-turn cleanup. Point-wise, though, it's 73-13. So I shouldn't worry too much about Alexander's situation because, well, good commanders can rally their troops. These Persians are not good. All right. I'm having a lot of trouble playing anything that's not an XX game for whatever reason. That's the only thing I can get any level of excitement about. Here, it's just like getting a turn done every couple days or something. There are reasons outside, but Alexander took his initiative, try to right things over on his right flank. Things look okay everywhere else, but over here he looks so thin. If there was any leadership for the Persians, hey, I got some things that didn't get flipped. If there was any leadership at all for the Persians of any reasonable quality, he would be in a lot of trouble here. But as it stands, he's facing a lot of troops that aren't bad, not at all. The cataphracted Bactrians, and I've got some Scythians that are also cataphracted there, and well, the chariots, they haven't been doing as well as I had hoped, but in part because I don't have leaders, but part of it is they just the Macedonian units are too good to just ride by and shoot them off. And I've got other units that would be at risk. So it's not like in, Kadesh or something like that from Chariots of Fire where I can just swing a line of chariots by the other guy's infantry and try to keep my own units away from his chariots. There's just not that option. Cav is maneuverable. Things can hit it from behind. They're no longer the gods of the battlefield, even though they're not as bad as they show up in some of the later games, the SPQR stuff. The situation over here on this flank, first of all, I've got to try to save units. So where there are routing units, I can't just let them go, not when I'm nearly halfway to my route number. Because even if I don't know, maybe I should. The other thing is, I'm a little out of position. I have to close this door if I'm going to be talking. It's awfully late at night. My wife gets upset. I could trigger these and move them forward and then hope to get reinforcements for them. But they could end up, in a horrible position and essentially cave this whole front. Now, those are all heavies. So if I get them moving as a second line, they won't be completely defenseless. If it was that infantry or something, I would not have much hope for it. All right, we'll see if we can get some Persians done. Managed to get enough energy to do 2 of them, but I don't have money anymore. One of them was big, though. Able to get a line command and then bring some additional units up with a momentum. A whole bunch of Lancers here looking to try to swing the balance over on that side. Right now, the Macedonians have the edge, but that could change very heavily if another bit of luck comes through. I couldn't quite reach, but and then over here, well, not much. I just moved the leader up, basically. He moved one of these Lancers into place. I don't think that one's actually in charge formation. There aren't enough counters for everything. And, you know, when you have counters like that, routed's one thing. But when you start putting counters on top of other the markers on top of counters, you start losing track, or at least I start losing track of which units need to be flipped over at the end of the turn and such not. And that's part of the grumpiness here. But this guy moving into location, hey, if he gets, you know, a decent command, not a line command for the chariots, but if he gets a decent set of activations, he could actually maybe swing things in this direction. That might open up a hole, might make a place for those peltists to interact really quickly, but, you know, I think if I can slice this, that would be pretty damn telling against them, because yeah, the Macedonian units are worth a lot more than those chariots are. Hey, some weirdness here. Darius, or Darius, as I've been hearing him called recently in a show, but I'll keep calling him Darius, unleashes his elephants. He only sends one out into combat, and that's kind of important because the rules for elephants, at least in this version, have become more complicated. Well, have become a little bit more complicated by having this rule that you basically have to have someone leading the elephants, or if you don't, you can put a temporary elephant leader in charge of a command. Now, that doesn't happen until after they've engaged in combat. So this elephant is now kind of special, and I'll try to play with that. It's an optional rule. It's kind of difficult to handle. I may not remember it, and if not, I'll be playing with elephants per the basic rules. They managed to destroy a companion cav through a couple of means, but and drive off some peltists. The others are positioning themselves, making Alexander's situation look much, much worse. Elephants are hard to deal with when cav is your main striking force. They're actually not that easy to deal with, period. But especially since the Macedonians won't jump out of their way the way the Romans did. But on a continuation roll, Darius got a die roll of doom, and all these units withdraw. Now, there's no real rule for this. It's because his line is so close to the edge of the map. He's close to the edge of the map. It's things within half his range. I'm going to charge them against the Persians. So we're looking at another, 15 points being assessed against them. So that's kind of painful. And leadership be damned. There's enough points of leadership, and I'm getting some momentum actually off this guy, that Alexander is just sort of losing this flank here. He's in a lot of trouble. It's a couple of the Bactrians came in, scared off some of the Lancers that he has over there. Part of the problem is he's got some of his companions he had to leave behind. And now I started doing something weird with them, maybe in part fear of the chariots, but I've been so damn worried about the chariots. The elephants are a danger, although elephants can just kind of go random because these guys are not high quality elephants. They've only got, I think, 4 tactical quality, which means they engage. There's a chance they could just rampage, a fairly good chance. And elephants don't usually go above a 6, like really good elephants. So no matter what, there's a chance that things could go terribly wrong with elephants. These are particularly risky elephants, though. And if you have the majority of the units in an area, which the Persians do, it can be particularly dangerous, but I felt like I needed to use them. And the nice thing about them is they were just the tipping point that could knock over the cav that was there. And then on top of that, following up with some light cav that are moving into position to chase down what's there. Alexander has to do something about this, and I'm not quite sure what to do. Maybe route away and try to put something in its way. Not like the left flank's going all that well either. Here, 2 momentums. The Persians managed to clear away pretty much everything that's kind of in the back. There's a pocket up here of good cav. Just with flank attacks, picking things off, that's getting very weak. And I've got a hammer coming down here eventually. Especially if I decide not to try to rally things, or if I get momentums and such. And the real threat here is, sure, point-wise, the Persians are a lot closer to routing than the Macedonians are. But this may not be good enough, you know? If both flanks collapse, it's pretty easy for a cav-heavy army to do a big number on the phalanxes and that light infantry that they have associated with them. So I don't know quite what to do. The Macedonians did try to trump in to prevent the first momentum, and they failed. Don't like to trump usually, and choosing to do so with a 5-liter might not have been the greatest idea, but I felt like I needed multiple activations over here if I could get them. So I didn't want to jump in with Alexander, and if Alexander uses his trump, well, that wouldn't be so bad, but it's the bypass of my other leaders. Bypassing the Persians is the advantage. I would get that off the 5-liter, and you know, those kind of decisions are tough to make. I'm going to look up to see whether or not I have a chance of just winning this battle by chasing Darius off the field. If I can figure out some way, I've got a little squad of companions back here. That may be my only option at this point. Just the numerical superiority is so tough. Now, historically, that's what Alexander did, but he also was successful on one of the flanks, and this flank over here. And I don't feel like I've gotten that kind of breakthrough, but the center is weak. And if I can use those companions maybe to drive through the center and push the phalanxes forward to pin some troops, try to keep something going on all flanks, maybe I can do that, but I don't know quite what the rules are on Darius. Interestingly enough, there's very little effect. He can leave the battlefield and it's not going to affect the morale of his army. I don't like that. I'm not sure what level it should be. If he's killed, that's the game, but if he leaves the battlefield, so what? He's not that impressive. In fact, he's not impressive at all. You know, he's got a good range, but he can only command 3 units per activation. His initiative's low, so you know he's also not going to get too many momentum checks. I don't see him as the way of winning. I'm actually kind of shocked because the word of him leaving the battlefield was supposedly a pretty major effect on his army. It looks to me like the Persians are winning completely on both flanks. They pretty much demolished the left flank. Maybe even, well, this is pretty bad too. We got a couple of units back here. There isn't much here. There's 1 unit there, 1 unit there. This thing could have been attacked, but instead I moved a cav up. I've got, you know, the problem of trying to flow enough troops forward to be able to do things. But honestly, this big squad of lancers here can swing around, so I don't know if I really need those forces in the back. Certainly not the infantry there. They're just there in case somebody gets a die roll of doom and retreats them off the map, as far as I can tell. I mean, they're slower than everything else, and you know, they're not part of that kind of infantry front line. If there was such an infantry front line, the Macedonians would just smash it. The problem for the Macedonians has been, wow, if we move forward, we're going to expose our flank, so we got to make sure the cav moves forward first, and then the cav moving forward ended up having both flanks destroyed. So, ouch. I'm obviously no Alexander, but I can tell you this is at least not a terribly unbalanced battle against the Persians. It may be that a good player on both sides would be different from, say, a not terribly good player like me on both sides. But I definitely get the feeling that Alexander's got a challenge here, at least, you know, for how I play. Macedonians had a couple of heavy cav back here they were able to pull out of their ass, and another unit, I think, further forward. And I'm not going to say that they evened the score. If they had gotten some momentums, they didn't. This would have felt more like the kind of attritional battle that'll favor them. But it's not so clear, at least what's going on over here. There's the threat of this huge Lancer squadron here. That, I don't know what to do. But there isn't a lot of command there. If he doesn't get a line command, he's only going to, or him, they're only going to be able to trickle them in. So, you know, again, command might become the key here. The attritional battles tend to favor the better commander because they can rally their routed units. This time, though, a couple of peltists that were up here kind of vaguely guarding this flank, well, they dissolved on rally attempts. So, and that serves two purposes. It also not only weakens the army, but it weakens the overall morale, which, you know, that's how you win the game, and the Macedonians right now have a huge advantage that way, but with the flanks collapsing, this is in doubt. Looking a little brighter on the left flank. I can't do anything with these because of that failed Trump attempt. I'd like to try to break up that center right there. There's no question of that. But I've moved the Hephaestists, and I'm pulling the reserve line of hoplites forward in order to try to hold the gap here. You see, I have a fair amount of force. I also smacked into an elephant, but it was able to react, and, well, I don't particularly want to actually attack it, I don't think. If I could have gotten the flank hit on it, that would have been good. The big problem Alexander had over here is he can't rally most of his shit. And it'll be falling back, and then maybe he'll be able to. But the reason he can't rally it is there's too many archers. Even horse archers have a 3 hex range. And that just prevents him from, you know, reorganizing his forces out of missile range. Which I was only able to rally stuff that was far away. But I think maybe I can form something that can kind of hold the line here. Still got the worry of these chariots. I sent one of my companions out, and he's almost doomed. I mean, he's going to be routed, but eventually. But he knocked out one of the chariots. I'm getting rid of them slowly. They just scare me so much because I know what they could do. They might not succeed, but like the elephants, they're one of these kind of funky little things that can do you a lot of damage if you're not careful, and they could plow into the flank here. But, you know, I have to get some forces to deal with the cavalry. The cavalry is a known threat. That's not going to just collapse on its own. The chariots might just fail, as the elephants might. All right, we'll do the post-turn cleanup. And Alexander's on his way back, bringing all these forces with him. He also struck with some lancers, some rallying you can see. This was the elite initiative. Less that can happen there. The more I'm looking at these commanders here. These guys are some of those contingent commanders, and I've had trouble finding some of them maybe without any troops. Now, I don't want to spend an effort to move them off the board. I could just remove the ones that are useless, because basically if anything approaches them, they're allowed to withdraw. They're kind of just cluttering up the board at this point. I was considering that, but then thought, well, legitimately I can't take them off. There might be some way you could kind of surround them and score points for killing them or something. But mainly they're just kind of out of the way. And I don't want to spend one of Alexander's commands to move them. Although, actually, they probably could be moved for zeros, which seems reasonable. Because they pay one less. See, they legitimately can't do a line command without a unit. That's the problem. If they had a unit near them, I could move them for 0 with the unit. But without a unit, I can't. And that's actually caused some problems where I've pulled units away from their contingent commander, and then I do have to spend an effort to bring that contingent commander up. And that's why I'm not just shifting these guys out, because there is a play effect that's implied. Even if their own existence, I could remove them from the table. Ranked commanders in the right place at the right time can do pretty well, actually. Over here, some hoplites thrown in drive those cav off my chariot flank. And then over here, through some of the lancers. Now this broke up any potential of a line command, but the officers I have there aren't very good. They probably wouldn't get it. And slammed it into this heavy cav. That would have been a flank shot if it hadn't turned. As it was, they're kind of evenly matched, but you know, these should be gone. It's hard to remember to clean everything up in the local areas. I just want to make sure. I think that's the only missile recuperation I was allowed that I didn't take. You know, I found some routed unit back here that I forgot to move, stuff like that. It's just a common occurrence in these bigger battles, especially because it's hard to keep track of everything that's going on all the way across the board. And Persian attacks are beginning to flank. Drove away one of the peltist units, and we're getting into position to start lighting up the hoplite line. Now they can run away. It seems a little weird, but these cav are hacking their way through. You can get out of a zone of control as long as you're not moving into another one. And if I recall correctly, I'd have to look up the specifics, but I know you can leave a single zone. A double zone you can't leave. And we'll be able to, you know, try. I mean, our rear is going to be exposed. We didn't get far enough. We didn't get close enough, mainly because of last turn's failure on a trump attempt. Persian success continues really on both flanks. This one, you know, it was basically wiped out. We knocked out one lead unit out here and something back here, and just really crushing it. And doing some recuperation, moving units forward to join the line. I don't see any hope over here for the Macedonians. Over here there's Alexander and a fair amount of heavy cav. I'm heavily outnumbered. Sort of my hope is somehow that the phalanx can do something, but I think it's too late. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to be in this position where you're looking at it and saying, yeah, you know, the battlefield situation is so terrible. I've been this way before. The last Darius battle, it looked like he was turning the tide at the end, but his army ran out of gas. It broke eventually, just from the sustained attrition. And, you know, we're 60 points away here and 100 here. That's a lot of damage I have to do. The problem is there's almost no striking power left to the Macedonian army at this moment. There's this. And potentially these, they're quite a big chance if they can just get their hands on something. Ooh, called chariots. Chariots aren't worth shit. And the cav and the chariots can all just kind of run away and allow the outflank to happen. So it's kind of like a Horns of Hatton type situation, except, well, not really, because there's no real, oh yeah, you're succeeding type of feeling going on anywhere here. We're pretty much done with the turn at this point. The phalanx pushing forward. This managed to scare away some of the cav, not rout it, just scare it away. It was threatening towards a flank, but couldn't quite hit a flank, so the cav was able to withdraw, but without excess damage. I looked up the slipping through zones of control. Actually, you can just run right past them in the sense that they stop you, but then you can move past them on the next turn. So if there's holes in the line like there are here, you can be in position here and then you can just walk through. But of course, once you hit here, you're hit by another zone. So you can go zone to zone. The problem that is the interpretation of how you turn. If you do a turn, you're moving from one zone to another, so you get stopped. So if you have to rotate in order to get out of the zone, you're not going to be able to get out. And that's where things get tricky. You can see Alexander's trying to form something up to face the Persian incursion. And remember, he gets that elite movement, so he gets another attack. But we have some fun. On his his first momentum, because he only gets one with the elite turn having happened before, the Thracians manage to spook the elephants. Now, they're at a firepower disadvantage here, and took some tactical quality hits themselves. But they've managed to frighten the elephants, and that means that we're going to get to roll and start to see which way the elephants go. Now, if I recall correctly, yeah. So a 7 through 9 kills the elephant. It's a 1 through 6, but you use a 10-sided die. And a 0 sends it towards friendly troops. Otherwise, we follow. Okay, so 4 is going to be heading this way. It goes right into the Thracians and hits them once, because it's hitting the front, so that's just one cohesion hit. Now it goes again. Now I believe they're allowed 3 of these rolls. Fourth consecutive rampage roll. Okay, second one is 2. They're going to head this way, and they go boom, boom, boom. And this gives me a chance to run away. These guys aren't really in any danger. I just want to get them out of the battle. They're cluttering the board. They don't do anything. So that was 2. Third is 6, which is going to go up. 3. Oh no! I need a... And now the final possible roll is an 8, which is going to kill the elephant. And now I think it's worth 2 points. I have to look that sucker up. But it didn't do a whole hell of a lot of damage. Ooh. Yeah, that's my elephant. I thought I had lost another unit. And I'll do the end of turn cleanup at the same time. I need to do this worth 2 points. I noticed it was an attack I didn't accomplish. These lancers smashed those cav. Now they're swinging around in position to hit the rear of some of the other cav back there. These guys are sharing that marker. Get bumped. Sometimes routing is a little weird for me, like this guy. He's routing in front of his units, but the order of priority for the routing, he's not going to do a pass-through. I find when they're running down the line, especially from the middle of the line, it looks pretty silly. The situation looks like it's improved dramatically for the Macedonians. I think that's a little deceptive. The main point being this flank is still exposed. There's forces here, there's forces here that can swing around. This is not able to withstand the phalanx particularly, although the chariots actually have their own little might to them. Defensively, they're surprisingly good. If you look at phalanx versus them, that's only the 5 table. That's pretty lousy for a phalanx, but the phalanx gets all kinds of benefits that don't really, that aren't all that apparent when you just look. These hoplites do not get as many benefits, though. Their tactical quality is lower, so they're more likely to break, but they get their defensive bonus, etc. And if the chariots actually attack, the Greeks will have the opportunity to possibly open channels and let them through. So I'm not as worried about the chariots as I was before, when they had room to maneuver and maybe, created a string where that whole line of chariots could basically take out 1 unit per turn, a la the Kadesh type situation, that you just look at it and you say, well, I can't do anything about them, they're too damn fast. Well, there's horses in this game, so they're not too damn fast, and the infantry's reasonably speedy. Anything else? Yeah, the main thing is that this flank looks like it's kind of hanging out there. Yeah, this recuperated pretty well, but then the other side of it is the points. If much damage happens to the Persians, their army is going to fall apart. Some serious mobility problems here. Out of the units I have kind of in front that can do something, I have some heavy cav, or lancers, I'm not sure which. I think it's the companions, yeah. That can sweep around and hit behind these chariots, but maybe, I'm not sure, because they're in charge formation. Turning is expensive and they need to turn. But I really want them to slam into the non-charge formation heavy cav and break up the biggest threat out there. And beyond that, the infantry that I have, what I'd really like is some light cav to sling around here, but I don't seem to have anything available, or non-charging formation cav. I really don't seem to have anything available to me. All I have is these peltists, and this guy is very fatigued. He's unable to recover because of the archers, and he couldn't actually even move around. He could do a side attack, but that's less likely to be effective because they can probably turn then. Some impressive attack die rolls, like 3 9s in a row, routed the heavy cav in through this dense formation, which caused a little bit of disruption. Not much. And then also over here from the back. But now I can't follow up immediately because this was the elite initiative. So that's one of the problems with the elite initiative. It allows you to, what's kind of cool is you probably went last. So basically all that really matters is it guarantees you go 2 actions a turn with your elite leader. You don't have to roll from momentum. And you get to jumpstart an action right at the beginning of the game. Now, it might even be wiser not to take your elite initiative on the first turn of the game, because then you might actually get 3 actions on the... you're still going to get just 3 actions a turn, but you might get 3 actions on the first turn, followed by a guaranteed follow-up. That's the thing. It's this guaranteed follow-up right after the turn ends. You know you'll be able to do something else. So it just kind of skews the ordering a little bit. And it's the fact that it's guaranteed that's really kind of the important thing, I guess. And it's begun. Throwing some lancers behind these phalanx units. But, even hitting them in the rear, they're too big and too stupid to realize that they're getting hurt, basically. So they, can just keep moving forward. And that's really the hope of it. They took enough damage in both cases to have a chance of routing. This one, just a chance. This one went over its limit, but in both cases, or maybe the other way around. But in both cases, they survived it. Over here, we routed a heavy cav. This is more of the attrition game, which, again, I think the Macedonians win, except that the Persians have such numbers. The Persian side of things, pulling some troops up. Darius getting himself in a position where he can give a line command to this, well, to the parts of that. I don't know. He can get he can get 4 units with the heavy cav, which is better than his normal command if need be. But basically he's moving himself and some troops forward because that center looks awfully weak and precarious, even though I'm chipping away at the back here. Over here, launch some attacks, solidifying the line here, cracking things over here, driving away some cav that was kind of doing threatening things, and pretty much this looks good and solid to me. This looks pretty solid to me. Being able to slip around here looks seriously bonus, and then that's where the opportunity is for the Macedonians, really. Because the cav maneuverability, etc. Well, I'm down. The number of cav that I have that's operable is just too low compared to what's available to the Persians. And they have their elephants back here too, which can really screw up any kind of cav effect. Here, the numbers are just too telling. I mean, I got all this coming. And this is all cav able to defend that flank, and I'm able to slip things around. Right. On to the Macedonian side. The push forward of the phalanx hoplites, that was effective, but not without cost. You can see we scared away a lot of the cav. They didn't choose to stand, but a couple of them got picked off, clustering problems, although actually, I'm not sure. Maybe he could have gotten out of there. I don't know. Anyway, the Immortals got hit, a couple of them driven back, and what else? Then the Chariots got hit, and a few of them died. But the cost is one of the hoplites is gone, and that's 10 points. You know, that's how the Macedonians lose, is they start losing those suckers. But we were going to lose them to getting picked off from behind if we didn't throw them into the battle. I mean, we may still lose more. The hoplites especially, or the phalanxes especially, are pretty solid, though. I mean, it's hard to hurt them. These guys, the ones that got hit from behind, have problems. There's no question, but they are phalanxes. Cracking them is tough, and you know, we're getting rid of the very large threat to them of that whole formation coming around the side. They're going to have to work a little harder. Over here, the question is, do we want to chase after the... Well, first of all, where's our leader? He's way back here. So we're kind of cut off, and that's the problem with the Persians. They send some forces, and then those horses just stop, and they don't really do much, and they become really sitting targets. There's a possibility I might be able to move up and activate them. But then the question is, do we hit the back of the phalanxes? Which, you know, that could be the battle, right? But or do we send somebody out after this lone supply baggage train, which is worth 10 points or something like that to the Macedonians? So that's pretty cool too. And it's easier than taking out a phalanx. The problem, of course, is when we get to here, and then we have to send a leader down to send them the rest of the way. So I feel like you kind of need to break up the... I think it's easier to handle the battle than to send some leader off to go handle a pillaging operation. Alexander is being Alexander, minus charging into combat, which he'd be really good at, but then his forces wouldn't work. It's the thing I hate most about these scenarios, as opposed to, say, the SPQR ones, which I think work a little better. There's just too much of a disadvantage for Alexander or other early era ancients from just throwing themselves into battle. You have to maintain command of the field by being not engaged. Anyway, What does he do? Mainly rallying, some strikes over here, and through the path. Well, so there were two activities. The first one, the Hypaptists, and some units over to the side there, Lancer, Peltists, moved forward and pretty much demolished this and kind of tied up the chariots. They're not going to be an effective force anymore. So as far as I'm concerned, we've won this section. I'm not sure here, but this little section where I was so worried about, and that kind of held me in check. Over here, things are going pretty well for the Macedonians. Over here, they're in a mess, and over here it's up in the air. But the Cav battles keep, they're so fluid that it's hard to tell who's got the edge at any given time. The fact that I've got kind of this solid line, a sporadic line, I guess, is very appealing. It means that it's going to be tougher, but not impossible, because I've got units here that are going to be striking and cutting things up. It's going to be tougher, though, for the Persians to take too much advantage of things, but we'll see, because, if I can get troops coming in through here, they can swerve around, hit the back of that, and just destroy it rather than anything else. Point-wise, we're at 131 for the Persians. I don't see anything running off the board right now, and on either side, and 62 for the Macedonians. So, again, the Persians are on a real time limit. They're going to have to take away Macedonia's capability of doing damage to their army. And they've been trying, but it's a rough haul. Here are some points that are going to change. That's 10 more points for the Macedonians. He uses his initiative to clear up some problems. A little bit of attacks here, push some more elephants, send them running, basically, rather than getting hit in the flank or having to try to make a sharp turn. The elephants are very useful. They're delicate, though, and you got to be really careful. Similarly, the chariots, just overwhelmed by quality units is what happened there. Their tactical matrix is still pretty good, but boom, got rid of that obnoxious wall before it could do any serious damage. And then cleaning up some of, there was a heavy cav kicking around back there. Lost a lancer for it. Now that puts it over into the Persian side, and it's hard to tell. It really is. The points say the Persians are going to lose this one. They're at 140 to 72. Position has improved significantly for the Macedonians at this point, but there's these gaps that could disappear, and that point total could look a lot different if some of those phalanxes fail their checks. Break for the Persians. They start off with their weakest leaders, right? Start funneling some of the lancers, etc., to try to get around behind. After a very lucky momentum check, this Craterus tries to trump in again, and he fails, and that means I'm not going to be able to react here. Now, this kind of had to be done as a trump at some point or another. It couldn't have been done in my normal turn, because these guys would hit the back before I can do anything, so I had to take that chance. I was going to hit with these, and then, if I get momentums or whatever, I could push through the center. What's happening is the center is clearing out, but there's not a whole hell of a lot. Phalanxes are hard to turn, so trying to bring it to bear in this direction is going to be kind of tough. It might just go for the cheap points and charge forward. Imperfections in the line, Darius is managing to break the Macedonian center here. One phalanx went here, another one off the map, got hit over here. Just, if that line's not perfectly even, you can crack it so easily. Phalanxes are tough to do so because of their saves, etc. But this is where we see, when we were playing the tyrant scenarios, basically Syracuse had no chance because they were a hoplite-based army, and all these little units could stream in and take advantage of those little defects. Well, here we're seeing the same kind of thing. Some quality, smaller units. If it was this crap back here, it just wouldn't be able to hold up. It would fail too many of its the initial quality check when you're going into battle. With the combat chart, the way it's set up and sort of a maximum of, well, 12 points of damage is pretty hefty, but 8 points of damage. These guys had 6 points on them each, got hit from behind. Not great die rolls against them, not the 8s, but enough to give like a +5 to the die roll in one case. They survived, so, you know, if those two had gone, that would be another 28 points. I got 14 in here, that's 42. That would put them up to 128, within range that if I could, you know, arrange maybe hunting down a couple of routed units or smacking units twice or something, I could reasonably say the Persians had a good shot of winning. It's still open, but I mean, on this turn. Right now it doesn't look like they're going to be able to make that kind of points, and they got to worry about their own points. They're not that far. And they've got stuff that's going to run off the board, so they may be breaking, even though it looks like they're winning the battle. No problem for the Persians. You have this leader over here. He's engaged. They haven't actually fought, but he's in a zone of control. He can't do a command. He can pass, which is what he's doing, in the hopes that somehow Alexander opens things up so that he's able to issue commands again. But that means no chance of rallying this, no chance of bringing all this to bear. All he could do is order the units within range of him to stand and fight, which isn't terribly helpful. Over here, things didn't go too well. We lost a unit due to rallying. We did rout a couple of Macedonians, but I just don't know. This is kind of a nail biter. So I waited until the absolute end of the turn after I did the mechanical cleanup type aspects and routing and such on. And it's a good thing because I noted this leader here who had passed, and well, I forgot about him during Alexander's turn, so then I remembered to jump in and use him. He decided to launch his attacks, mixed results, his own unit routed. And should have a route marker on it. It did not get a chance to rally, but they did succeed in routing the Agema companions. Swirling cav battle going on over here. Not working out too poorly for the Macedonians, but you can see they got their routed units falling back pretty hard. The problem was they were under archer fire, so they were unable to rally, so they fell all the way back. He's going to get a shot at rallying them next time. Point-wise, though, and one of the reasons why he launched that attack was after the end of the turn, 168 for the Persians. That means basically, you know, a couple of these units, the Immortals are here, that's 16 points. That's it's enough to end the game. So I've got to either wreck the Macedonian army, which is 50 points away from it, or save all my routing units without losing anything. That changes the nature of the situation. Over here, we had some guys putting pressure on the back of the Persians who were positioning themselves behind it. So this looks like it's going to be a Macedonian victory. I think we can call it pretty certainly with the point score at this point. But it's not a pretty one. Not at all. Alexander just finished off the Persian army during his initiative phase. He got an additional 8. One light cav and a chariot he actually killed. You can see he routed a number of the units over here. In addition, chariot was the one over here. It was a double bounce, not off the combat itself, off the pre-combat. Both sides just threw their arms down and said no. I don't know if that's legitimate, but it would have gone in favor of the Macedonians because of the tiebreaker if it works like regular combat does, but I don't think it does. I think both sides can fail on a check to rush in. That's similar to the situation that happened not in an Ancients battle but at Gettysburg, where the Union line was just about to collapse. Troops were streaming away, but at the same time the attack failed. Basically the Confederate units also turned and ran. I think I'll probably play some of this out. There's no chance of the Macedonians losing 50 points. That's within any reason. But the reason it's hard to tell whether or not I will is it depends kind of on my scheduling more than anything else. Doing a turn of this is actually a fairly significant piece of effort compared to most GBOH games because this is such a big battle, but it is kind of winding down. There's a lot of pieces in the dead pile, and I do like to see what else is happening at the same time. Okay, well, the least of the Persian leaders, the two twos, launch attacks here. You see one phalanx routed, another one was destroyed, and then over here routed a hoplite. Failed to dislodge this phalanx, but that one was at full strength. It actually had to make a check. It made its way back down. Oh, the Persians are still trying to make a game out of this. Attacks over here routed a couple of units. That's no big deal. Unless I get a follow-up attack, which I didn't over here, that's not going to happen. But coming over here, I was able, gotta flip this guy, to use 3-hole activations. Broke up another phalanx, and also hit and then chased down cav. Chased down routed cav, including ones that I just hit. And got a fair amount of points here, which added up, getting me to 146 on the Macedonians. They're close to breaking too. And remember, you play out the whole turn. So right now, the Persians are only a point ahead. Now, what's deceptive here is the Persians are ignoring their units that are going to rout off the map. And that's quite a fair amount of padding for the Macedonians. And they too can chase down routeds. There's plenty of points available for them. So it's kind of a pointless exercise, but they're certainly trying to at least, make it seem a little closer than it ended up being. Given that they were winning the battle, I mean, they demolished... well, wait a minute. We got another, 24 points sitting here. That's a fair amount of points. Wow, this is actually closer than I thought. I forgot about those heavies that I had already managed to dispatch. The Persians have made a pretty fair shot of things here. They've got 1 point over, as do the Macedonians. We're not done yet, but managed to rally a bunch of units that would have run off the map. Didn't get a second activation, so I didn't get to kill these, which would have been helpful. Point-wise, I've got 22 points ready to run off the map. The Macedonians have 7, 14, makes 21. And is this another? Another 10 is 31. So they can't just put the game in their pocket at this point at all. The Persians have done a pretty damn good job here. So, guess we start with the Macedonians and see, if they can... There's something kind of silly about this hunting down the routed units in the midst of the battle. It doesn't really make sense. Some of the games like... I know some of the Men of Iron based games. I'm not sure if Men of Iron itself did this. But things like... oh, geez. Where's the medieval one? Or the Italian one? I don't know where I've got Guelphs and Ghibellines. Keep track of, and I think Men of Iron sort of does, the routed units cost you something, you know, and when they rally, they come back in terms of your points. And I think that's applicable, so that hunting routeds doesn't make sense. It's just to make them permanent dead in that game. Well, in this game, it makes a lot of sense. And it generates this kind of silly thing where, you know, I'm not saying it never happens. That's what the pursuit rule is about. But in general, you don't go hunting the guys who are leaving the field. You try to win the battle that's underway right now. So, you know, it's a minor gripe, but it is also a game. So in order to win the game, you have to play by the rules. Indians managed to mop up most of the points over here. They did lose a unit through a rally attempt. They would have gone off the board anyway, but whatever. However, I have two of my leaders over here and nowhere near enough troops, but I'm looking for lots of activations. I saw this as the most likely to gain me points. The who is this? Parmenion. His first momentum check resulted in a die roll of doom, handing things off, and we're going to give this guy over here an activation from it, and he'll be able to score some points off of these routed units here. I think that's the best we can do. There's only one routed unit over here. I mean, that's what we're doing, is we're picking off points. There's also routed units over here that he could conceivably kill as well. So there's a fair amount of points. Right now it stands at 205 to 158, which clearly the Macedonians are racking up the points. And what's on the board is a little in Persia's favor, but not that much. So we could actually probably pocket at this point. And rolled for that activation. Okay, then we do Alexander's attacks. And you can see he's cleared up a lot of what was here. Chasing down routeds, really, and creating new ones and chasing them down. But he only has a maximum of 2 activations. He got them both. Gets the score up to 245, so that's, about 70 points over. Whereas the Macedonians are 33 points over. But we still have to count the total after the cleanup and seeing what routes off the board. So we're not sure what that's going to work out as. And with those big units coming off, it doesn't make up because we had some valuable Persians going off the board too. So it ends up with a 92 point differential for the Persians, 57 for Macedonia. Wow. Nail biter throughout. Usually you don't have to resort to chasing down routed units to try to rack up the score at the end of the battle. Chasing them down during the battle to cause a break, sometimes that happens, but this felt like something that I can't even explain what was actually going on. And in fact, chasing down the routed units in general in terms of breaking the army is pretty iffy, except that you can always kind of look at it as they're not all that routed. The fact that they can come back in most cases means you have to interpret this under a slightly different light than, like, you know, those are like the hoplites throwing their shields down. No, there's special rules for the hoplites for that because they could not be reformed. There are conditions where troops are routing and you can't stop them, basically, and that's when you fail your rally check or whatever. But there are times when units took a serious setback, fell back in disorder, because remember, there's no real disordered state here. You're either fine with quality hits or you're routed. Well, routed seems to mean heavy disorder, maybe a little bit of panic, but not the I'm off the board stuff. This battle and how it played out, this is, you know, what I love most about GBOH, to tell you the truth. There's a bunch of scenarios where it's a little too unbalanced, but this one seems to almost qualify the entry cost for the entire box. And the Syracuse battles didn't generally feel as interesting as this. I know some people like Syracuse, the Tyrant package, very much. There are probably people who like Hoplite too. I don't know. I just found that I was getting ahistorical results consistently based on the type of army. Now here again, though, we see those big formations. They're not that good. They have certain advantages, but their lack of mobility makes them really a target to these smaller unit forces, the smaller counter forces with quality units. And I said that before. So, all right, let's send this up. And I don't know, I'm getting kind of excited because I think I'm going to play another train game. All right, up it goes.